There is nothing more important to the future of this country than the voice. And I say that not because it's going to make a positive difference to the nation, but because I believe it will irreparably change our country for the worse. And despite the pacifying words of the Yes campaign, the proposed voice is divisive and it is racist. Opening up a constitutional role that is only available to people of a certain race is the very essence of racism. And yet the Yes campaign will openly deny that. So to be so brazenly dishonest about such a clear element of their proposal, it begs the question, what else are they lying about? The Yes camp will tell us that race is an outdated concept, and yet they are hanging their shingle on it. See, in their eyes, the failures within many Aboriginal communities are due to racism. The substance abuse and sexual abuse, that's due to racism. The domestic violence, it's due to racism. The incarceration rate of Aboriginal criminals, that's due to racism. It's all racism, all the time, and yet they keep saying race is an outdated concept, and it plays no part at all in this proposal. That's pure bunkum, and we all know it. And it's demonstrable bunkum, because when you go through the background papers leading to this referendum, it's made very, very clear. Unlike the Prime Minister, I have waded through the minutes of meetings, and it couldn't be more clear to me. The voice is not the end point. It is just the beginning. And it says so again and again and again in the documents supporting the voice. It's the beginning of an assault on our nation by a group of activists who want power and money enshrined in perpetuity in our Constitution. Now, these papers makes clear that this referendum is wholly unnecessary. You see, the voice could be legislated through Parliament this week if the government actually wanted to do it. Now, they don't, and they won't, because then you see the full horror of what's to come would be on display. And of course, it could be undone by a future government that actually is genuinely committed to the unity and betterment of all Australians. Instead, the Yes mob want a constitutional claim that can never be realistically undone, and where the real influence of the voice is going to be determined not by people or by the Parliament, but by the High Court. And as I said, this is just the start. Some of the demands in the meeting minutes include designated Aboriginal seats in the Senate. They want an Aboriginal elected body. They want the prohibition of racial discrimination. And they want a treaty within the Constitution. That gives you some taste of the end goal here. Racial preference, racial division, a race-based parliamentary system. And then they want a treaty that includes land and sea rights, a fixed percentage of gross national product through rates and land taxes and royalties. They want the right to self-determination, with our money of course, and a timeline to achieve Aboriginal control. And then the methodology for achieving that goal, or those goals I should say, is all laid out. Once the voice is done, we're meant to move on to the Makarata Commission. And here's a quote. Following the report of the Special Joint Parliamentary Committee on a bill establishing the voice, the committee should undertake an inquiry into a second bill establishing an appropriate institution to be called the Makarata Commission, to supervise the making of agreements between First Peoples and Australian governments. The bill establishing the Makarata Commission should confer all necessary powers and functions to facilitate the settlement of a national Makarata framework agreement between Australian government and First Peoples, as well as subsequent First Peoples agreement at the local level, which should have as one of its functions the role of a Truth and Reconciliation Commission to enable all Australians to face the truth of the past and to embrace a common hope for the future. Well, the graphic you see describes the Makarata Commission as the umpire with the goal of making agreements between the government and the tribal groups, now known as First Nations, even though they were First Peoples in the document I just read. And incredibly, the term First Nations was adopted from Canada, and it's actually only recently been applied here. And in that respect, it's entirely made up, like so much other ancient tribal mythology that we're repeatedly told is truth. But let's go back to the umpire bit. Doesn't it bell the cat on how there's going to be a group of racial elites deciding what's right and wrong, what's fair and not fair, over the rest of us? They'll be the umpire, determining the who, the what and the how much of almost everything that touches our parliament. Okay, maybe it's an old-fashioned notion I have, but I thought the parliament itself was meant to make those types of decisions. But then we've already got several umpires in that space already. Elections, for one, I mean, they enable all of us to render our verdict on how we are governed equally. And then, of course, we've got the court system, which acts as an independent upholder of the rule of law, which is meant to apply to all of us equally. But now we're supposed to accept a race-based umpire, which is clearly on the agenda if the racist voice is installed in our constitution. This process is a Trojan horse for further racial divide. And it says as much in the 112 pages of meeting notes that the Prime Minister, and I suspect many, many others in the Yes camp, simply couldn't be bothered to read. Vote no to the voice.